The Quest February sale has some great deals this week. Not quite as big as the previous holiday sale, but there are some games at new historical lows worth checking out. So in this video, I'll share some of my favorite deals that I think provide the best value for money. For any games that aren't on sale, you can also use my discount code VRCT for 10% off, which works anytime. First off, Apex Construct is a post-apocalyptic archery adventure in a world overrun by AI robots. This was one of the first great archery games ported from PSVR, but fell under the radar, so I'd easily call this a hidden gem, especially at the current price, which is 86% off at $1. Vampire the Masquerade is a stealth action adventure a bit like Assassin's Creed, but with more of a focus on stealth kills. A new historical low, 80% off at $6.
Uncomfortable for you.
Speaking of which, Assassin's Creed Nexus is a faithful adaptation of the flat games which intuitively implements the same combat and parkour mechanics into VR. It doesn't usually go on sale, so it's a great deal now, 50% off at $20. The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 is a shorter but more polished sequel with improved melee combat and weapons with a larger focus on action. 50% off at $5. Astro Hunters VR is a space-themed PvPvE extraction shooter with all the usual looting and crafting mechanics. But unlike most extraction games, this also has a PvE mode, which is very rare in this genre. 70% off at $6. Ember Souls is the Prince of Persia in VR, a hack-and-slash action-adventure with intuitive parkour mechanics, melee combat, and even magic abilities. The combat is a little janky, but the parkour is actually quite satisfying as the levels are quite large and take some figuring out to traverse, with a few puzzles to break the combat and exploration up. 60% off at $6. The Light Brigade is a fast-paced roguelike shooter with procedurally generated levels, which means every run feels fresh and different, unlike most roguelites. A truly underrated gem, 52% off at $12. Third-person games are extremely underappreciated in VR. They are very immersive and make you feel like you're observing the world from a wider perspective, which is also a lot more comfortable than first-person games if you're prone to motion sickness. One of the best games in this genre is Moss, which is a game that is always praised by all types of players. Both the first game and sequel are now at a new historical low, 50% off at $10 and 45% off at $10 for the sequel. World War Z brings one of the best flat-screen zombie shooters to VR, with the same large-scale zombie hordes that made the original one of the best in the genre, although without the online co-op this time. 50% off at $10.
And make the most of Aspire 1's ability.
Aspire 1 VR Operative, the Metal Gear Solid of VR, has some great stealth mechanics, but also allows you to go all guns blazing if you prefer. This originally launched in 2019, yet it's still getting updates 7 years later. The sequel from 2022 is also a great follow-up. 40% off at $12 and $18 respectively. The Siege VR is a siege engineering game that allows you to create any kind of siege weapon you can think of, from battering rams, ballistas, tanks, artillery, and more. The physics engine also means everything functions believably, provided your creations are structurally sound. 40% off at $9. The long-awaited sequel to one of the first games that put VR on the map, Gorn 2 is a gladiator arena brawler with over-the-top slapstick violence and a unique variety of weapons and traps. 30% off at $14. Red Matter 2 is a space station action-adventure with some of the best graphics ever seen on Quest 3, rivaling even PCVR exclusives. 47% off at $16. There have been many attempts to bring Time Crisis to VR, but in my opinion, Aim Assault is the best of them. The gunplay, sounds, graphics, art style, and even the dialogue feel very similar to the original Time Crisis series. 28% off at $13. Into Black is an action-adventure FPS inspired by games like Deep Rock Galactic. Explore and mine alien planets while defending against an onslaught of enemies in either the solo campaign or up to 4-player co-op, and even a PvPvE mode. 36% off at $16. Demeo Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked might be one of the best turn-based strategy games I've ever played in VR, as it has authentic tabletop-style gameplay that allows you to strategize your moves at your own pace. You can also view the world from a wide third-person perspective, or zoom in as if you were right there watching the battles play out in front of you. The game just released recently, so it's a more modest 20% off at $24. Hellsweeper VR is literally the Devil May Cry of VR, where you take on demonic monsters with a wide range of melee weapons, guns, and elemental magic. This was created by the team behind Sirento, so do be aware you will need very strong VR legs, as there's a lot of aerial movement and dodging, and the enemy are just as agile. A historical low of 60% off at $12.
This is the bandage.
Sci-fi horror shooter Memoriam is inspired by classics like Dead Space, with a focus on survival mechanics and a satisfying arsenal of weapons and enemy types. This is a game that ramps the horror and tension up the further you get. 40% off at $18. Iron Rebellion is a multiplayer mech PvP shooter with some of the most immersive cockpit mechanics in a mech game in VR. If you're not into PvP, their long-awaited PvE modes are also coming very soon. 32% off at $17. Res Infinite is a digital psychedelic rhythm shooter, which is actually a sequel of a PS2 game that released in 2001. If you want to experience something unique in VR, this game has some incredible digital worlds which are just awe-inspiring to see. The environments are truly mesmerizing and otherworldly. This is also one of the first VR games I ever bought back in 2018, and I still come back to it sometimes just to experience these worlds again. 45% off at $11. Mother Gunship Forge is a bullet hell roguelike shooter with a very original modular weapon upgrade system, which adds an endless variety of new weapon types. 55% off at $9. And lastly, the Titan Slayer Behemoth is a hack-and-slash action adventure with some monumental boss battles inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, the PS2 classic from the early 2000s. 50% off at $20. You can find all the links in the description, including more games I haven't mentioned. This is a shorter sale that lasts until the 22nd of February, but if you're watching after this date, you can still use my links for a discount. If you found this video helpful, feel free to leave a like and hit subscribe for more, as I'm always keeping an eye on sales. And I'll see you in the next one.